Clothing plays a role in all of our everyday lives, but do you know what really goes on in the fashion supply chain? The fashion industry accounts for 10% of global carbon emissions and 20% of global plastic production, and ethical and labor violations are also rampant in the industry. Customers do care about sustainability in the clothing that they wear. For example, a recent study by the Baker Retailing Center at the Wharton School found that 2/3 of consumers would be willing to pay extra for clothing that is made sustainably. Due to this rising consumer pressure, as well as increased regulation in the fashion industry, it is super important that executives understand their company in terms of environmental, social, and governance (ESG) metrics and take action accordingly.
However, current solutions to this problem are insufficient. There are several ESG rating services that rate companies directly instead of assigning a rating to the individual components of the supply chain. However, an MIT Sloan study found that these ratings are highly divergent because they use different sets of privately reported data. Additionally, because they rate the companies directly instead of diving into their supply chains, they often fail to account for supplier violations. There are some factory-level rating agencies, but they're known to be biased and can be misleading.
This is where ecoScore comes in. ecoScore aims to provide fashion retailers with ESG scores for factories in their supply chains. These scores range from 0 to 100 and are derived from unsupervised machine learning models trained on publicly available shipping data and certification data related to ESG. This data is compiled by Sourcing Playground, a startup we're working with focused on increasing sustainability in fashion supply chains. In creating our ESG scores for factories that emphasizes sustainability strengths and highlights key weaknesses, ecoScore allows companies to ensure that they are meeting internal benchmarks and allows investors to evaluate potential opportunities using ESG criteria.
Using data acquired from Sourcing Playground, we created an initial cluster model, and we used K-prototypes to do this because we had both numerical and categorical features, and we found that using 6 clusters worked best. And here's just a visualization of our results. So we had 3 different categories of certifications, and we found that based on these results, that cluster 1 would be our weakest cluster in terms of ESG, because for each category, they either have 0 or 1 certifications, whereas cluster 3 would be our best cluster because it has the highest number of certifications for each category. And so these results are going to be really useful when we go into our final model, where we hope to create an unsupervised learning algorithm that gives ESG scores on a scale of 0 to 100. And then we plan to work with an expert because we don't have like an underlying true score for any of these factories. So we plan to work with this expert in order to verify our final model and change it as needed.
Using this UI, fashion companies will be able to identify areas of improvement and switch suppliers accordingly to improve overall ESG. Thus, ecoScore's ESG ratings will offer increased transparency into fashion supply chains as well as actionable insights.